Hello and welcome to another episode of Storytime. It's so good to have you with us, and we have such a wonderful story this to share with you today. This is the tale of three trees. It's a traditional folk tale. This is retold by Angela Yule Hunt, and the illustrations are by Tim Yonke. It's a wonderful story, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it very much. So let's begin. Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to be when they grew up. They're the three trees on the mountaintop dreaming of what they're going to become when they grow up. The first little tree looked up at the stars, twinkling like diamonds. I want to hold treasure, he said. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure in the world. There's the tree looking up at the stars and wondering if he'll become a treasure chest filled with diamonds and gold. The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling on its way to the ocean. I want to be a strong sailing ship. I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship in the world. The third little tree looked down into the valley below, where busy men and busy women worked in a busy town. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all. I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. There are the three trees. One's looking down in the valley, and one is dreaming of being the tallest tree in the world. Years passed. The rains came. The sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, three woodcutters climbed the mountain. Here come the woodcutters, and there the trees standing tall. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me." With a swap of his shining axe, the first tree fell. Now I shall be made into a beautiful chest, thought the first tree. I shall hold wonderful treasure. The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It will be perfect for me." With the swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. Now I shall sail the mighty waters, thought the second tree. I shall be a strong ship fit for a king. The third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall, pointed bravely to heaven, but the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a sweep of his shining axe, the third tree fell. There we see the stumps of the three trees that had been cut down. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to the carpenter shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chests. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat, too small and too weak to sail the ocean or even a river. He was taken to a little lake. Every day, he thought his loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in the lumber yard. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was point the way to God. Many, many days and nights had passed. The three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlit night, poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said. And suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. Mary and Joseph are putting the greatest treasure, the baby Jesus, in the manger. The tree had become a treasure chest after all. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hands, and said, "Peace." The storm stopped as quickly as it had begun. And suddenly the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. The second tree finally became the boat that carried the king that he always wanted to be. It's a little different than he had dreamed, but he was carrying Jesus, our King. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cried. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. Each of the trees became what they always hoped they would be. The first tree became the treasure chest that it had hoped. The second tree carried a king as it had hoped. And the third tree pointed the way to God as it had hoped. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. This ends our story. I hope what you notice sometimes our plans in life are different from what actually becomes. But just like each of these trees that had gifts that could be used by God for so much good, each of us have gifts. God's Holy Spirit gives each and every one of us gifts as well, so that we can use to make the world a better place. May we always use our gifts in the way that the three trees used their gifts to bring God's promises of God's love to the world. Thanks for joining me this morning for this wonderful story of the three trees. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you'll come back and join us next time for story time. We try and post new stories every couple weeks, and in the meantime, we hope that you'll stop by and check out the other virtual offerings that we post on our New Covenant UCC Williamsport Facebook page, as well as this YouTube channel. In the meantime, I hope you all stay well and be safe and healthy. Peace, blessings, love, and prayers until we meet again. Bye-bye.